My parents said, "You can watch the wedding online." I did. Then the screen froze on the chaos. My name is Bella Carter, I'm 29, and last Saturday, I watched my family fall apart through a laptop screen. My parents told me I wasn't fit to attend my sister's wedding. They said I could watch online like everyone else who doesn't belong. So I did. And halfway through the ceremony, the live stream froze on chaos that shattered every illusion of their perfect world. Before I tell you how everything flipped, like and subscribe and drop a comment to let me know where you are watching from. To understand why I was watching my sister's wedding from my tiny kitchen instead of a velvet-cushioned chair, you have to understand my family. We weren't a family in the warm, messy sense of the word. We were a corporation. Carter and Coder, my father, Richard, was the CEO. My mother, Eleanor, was the head of public relations. My older sister, Dr. Lauren Carter, was the star product, the flagship model they proudly displayed in every showroom. And me? I was the quiet disappointment, the stock that never rose, the experimental model that was quietly shelved in the back of the warehouse. Lauren was everything my parents wanted, right from the start. She was born with a blueprint for success in her hands. She learned to read before she was 4. She never colored outside the lines. Her childhood was a highlight reel of achievements. I remember being 10 years old, sitting in the audience of her middle school's science fair. Lauren was on stage, poised and confident in a crisp white shirt, explaining her project on genetic mutations in fruit flies. She won, of course. My father stood up and applauded so loudly that people turned to look. He had a smile on his face that I'd never seen before, a look of pure, unadulterated pride. That same afternoon, I had run into the living room with a drawing I'd spent all day on. It was a portrait of our family, with big, happy cartoon heads and our dog Buster at our feet. I was so proud of it. I'd finally gotten my dad's smile right. I held it up for my mother to see. She was on the phone, planning one of her charity fundraisers, her voice a smooth, professional hum. She glanced down at my drawing, gave a tight little smile that didn't reach her eyes, and said, "That's nice, Bella. Very creative. Put it on the fridge." A few minutes later, Lauren came home, clutching the big blue first-place ribbon from the science fair. Mom hung up the phone mid-sentence. She knelt down, her whole body shifting to focus entirely on Lauren. She took the ribbon in her hands as if it were a holy relic, her voice full of a warmth I never heard directed at me. "Oh, Lauren, first place. Your father is going to be so proud. We have to get this framed immediately." My drawing stayed on the fridge for 2 days, held up by a banana-shaped magnet, before it was covered by a calendar for the fundraiser. A week later, it was gone. Lauren's blue ribbon is still on the mantelpiece in their living room, preserved in a polished cherry wood frame, right next to a professional photo of her graduating from medical school. That was the dynamic. Her achievements were framed and preserved. Mine were temporary and disposable. I was the artist. The word itself made my mother flinch, as if I'd said something dirty at the dinner table. When relatives asked what I did, she'd say, "Bella is very creative. She has a little art studio." She made it sound like a hobby, like I spent my days making macaroni necklaces instead of running a business, securing commissions and paying my own bills. My father was more direct. "She draws," he'd say with a dismissive wave of his hand, before changing the subject to Lauren's latest research publication. My studio apartment was my sanctuary. It was above a French bakery in a part of the city my parents called gritty. The floors were old, scarred hardwood, the windows were huge and let in the most beautiful morning light, and the entire place smelled faintly of rising bread and roasted coffee. The walls were covered in my work, canvases of stormy seascapes, charcoal sketches of people on the subway, abstract pieces full of color and emotion. It was messy, vibrant, and completely mine. It was everything my parents' house was not. Their home was a monument to beige. The walls were beige, the carpets were beige, the furniture was some shade of off-white. There was no clutter, no personality. It was a house designed to be photographed, not lived in. So when Lauren got engaged to Ethan Whitmore, it wasn't a surprise that my parents treated it like the deal of the century. Ethan was a wealthy investment banker from a family of other wealthy investment bankers. He was tall, handsome in a forgettable catalog model way, and wore suits that cost more than my rent for 6 months. He talked about portfolios, mergers, and market fluctuations. My father would listen to him with that same look of pure adoration he'd had at the science fair. One night, soon after the engagement, we all had dinner at my parents' house. It was a formal affair, as always. China plates, cloth napkins, and a silence that was only broken by the clinking of silverware and my father's questions about Ethan's latest acquisition. Lauren sat there, smiling serenely, a perfect accessory to her perfect fiancé. "This is more than a marriage," my dad announced, raising his wine glass in a toast. "It's a merger. The Carters and the Whitmores. This is the kind of alliance that builds dynasties." He beamed at Lauren and Ethan. My mother nodded, her eyes glittering with social and financial victory. "It secures Lauren's future," she said, as if my sister were a company asset whose value had just skyrocketed. I tried to join in. I really did. I wanted for once to feel like I was part of the conversation. "Ethan," I started, my voice sounding too loud in the quiet room. "Lauren told me your family has a home in the mountains. That must be so beautiful. I bet the views are incredible. I'd love to paint the landscape there sometime." My father cleared his throat, a sharp cutting sound. "Bella, we're talking about their financial portfolio, not the shrubbery." Ethan gave me a polite, empty smile. It was the kind of smile you give a child who has just said something silly. "Yes, it's a good investment. The property value has appreciated by 12% in the last 2 years. We see it as a long-term hold." He didn't ask about my painting. He didn't acknowledge my passion. He just translated my world into his, a world of numbers and assets. I looked at Lauren, hoping for a flicker of support, a small smile, anything. She just stirred her soup, her eyes fixed on the bowl. She never defended me. It would have been a bad business decision. Rocking the boat wasn't profitable, and Lauren was always profitable. The wedding planning started immediately, and it was an operation run with the precision of a military campaign. My mother and Lauren had binders and spreadsheets. They had meetings. They talked about caterers, florists, and guest lists in hushed, serious tones. It was all about status, about appearances. The right people had to be there. The right flowers had to be on the tables. The right brand of champagne had to be served because the Whitmore's friends would notice if it wasn't. One afternoon, I called my mom, feeling a rare flicker of hope. I had just finished a beautiful set of wedding invitations for a client, hand-painted with delicate watercolors. "Hey, Mom," I said, trying to sound casual. "I was just thinking, if you haven't hired someone for the invitations yet, I'd love to design them. It could be my wedding gift to Lauren and Ethan." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear her calculating, weighing the pros and cons. The pro was that it would be free. The con was that it would be me. "Oh, Bella," she finally said, her voice dripping with that fake, sugary gentleness she used when she was about to crush me. "That's a sweet thought, darling. A really, really sweet thought. But this is a very formal event. It needs a professional touch." The implication hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. "You are not a professional. You are a hobbyist. You are not good enough." "I am a professional, Mom," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "It's what I do for a living. I have clients who pay me for my touch." "I know, dear," she said, her tone instantly dismissive. "But honestly, this isn't your kind of crowd. It's all very traditional, very classic. We've already hired a calligrapher from the city. The Whitmores recommended him, and he does work for the governor's office. And that was that." The Whitmore's recommendation was more important than her own daughter's talent. The governor's calligrapher was a better brand association. It wasn't just a rejection of my offer. It was a rejection of my life, my career, my entire identity. I was the art project that didn't fit in their pristine beige gallery. I was the daughter who was always on the wrong side of the frame. I didn't argue. I had learned a long time ago that arguing was pointless. You can't win a debate when the judges decided who the winner was before you even opened your mouth. You just nod, smile, and swallow the bitter taste of disappointment. It was the role I was born to play. The phone call came 2 weeks before the wedding. It was a Tuesday evening, and I was in my studio, feeling good for the first time in months. I had just finished a big commission, a large canvas of a stormy coastline for a new hotel downtown. I was proud of it. I had managed to capture the exact moment the sun breaks through dark clouds after a storm, the light hitting the churning water. The smell of oil paint, turpentine, and linseed oil filled the air. It was the smell of my independence, my one true success. My hands were smudged with indigo and gray, and a streak of white paint was in my hair. For a few hours, I had forgotten about the wedding, about being the family's black sheep. I wasn't Lauren's disappointing sister or Eleanor's creative liability. I was just an artist, in my own space, creating something that felt true. Then my phone buzzed on the workbench. The screen lit up. Mom and Dad. A joint call. My stomach instantly tightened into a cold, hard knot. They never called together unless it was for a planned announcement. An official statement from the board of Carter & Co. And it was never good news for me. I took a deep breath, wiped my hands on a rag, and answered, trying to inject a lightness I didn't feel into my voice. "Hey, what's up?" "Bella," my mother started. Her voice was unnaturally soft and gentle, a carefully rehearsed melody of concern. That was always the first warning sign. It was the voice she used when she was about to deliver bad news with a smile, as if wrapping a brick in silk would make it hurt less when it hit you. "How are you, darling? Are we interrupting your work?" "I'm good, Mom. Just finishing up a painting." "What's going on?" I kept my tone even, refusing to give her the opening to ask about my little hobby. "Well, we were just going over some of the final, last-minute details for the wedding," she said, drawing out the words. "You know how it is. It's all become so big. Much bigger than we anticipated." I stayed silent, waiting. The other shoe was about to drop, and I could already feel the phantom pain of the impact. I could hear my dad clear his throat in the background, the impatient sound of a man who just wanted to get this unpleasant task over with. "The thing is, Bella," she continued, the silk in her voice wearing thin, "this event has become very high profile. The Whitmores have invited some incredibly important people, business partners from Zurich, a state senator, even Ethan's uncle, who is a federal judge. You understand the pressure we're under to make sure everything is perfect." I understood perfectly. I knew exactly where this was going. They were building a case against me, brick by silken brick, but I was going to make her say it. I wasn't going to let them off the hook that easily. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice flat and cold. "We just don't want you to feel uncomfortable, sweetie," she said, the fake sympathy in her voice making my skin crawl. "You don't know any of these people, and the atmosphere will be very formal, very stuffy. Not your scene at all. We were worried you'd feel out of place and wouldn't have a good time." There it was, the brick. "You don't belong. You will embarrass us. You are not good enough to be seen with us." My father, having lost patience with my mother's gentle maneuvering, finally broke in. His voice was brusque and efficient, like he was closing a business deal he found distasteful. "Your mother is trying to say that we think it would be better if you didn't attend the ceremony in person. It's a matter of logistics and atmosphere." The words hit me with a physical force. I stumbled back and had to grip the edge of my workbench to stay steady. My half-finished painting was in front of me, the stormy sea churning with color. It felt like that storm was suddenly inside my chest, a hurricane of humiliation and grief. All the air was sucked out of the room. I couldn't speak. The silence on the phone stretched on, thick with my shame and their cowardly relief. "Bella, are you there?" my mother asked, her gentle tone now frayed with impatience. She had expected a quick, clean amputation, and my silence was complicating things. "You're disinviting me," I finally whispered, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "You're disinviting me from my own sister's wedding." It wasn't a question. It was a statement, a fact that would now be a part of my history. "Don't be so dramatic," my father snapped, his voice sharp with annoyance. "No one is disinviting you. We are making a practical decision that is in the best interest of the family. We have to consider the family's image. The family's image. Not my feelings. Not Lauren's right to have her sister there. The brand. Carter & Co. had to be protected from its one faulty product. I was a liability they needed to mitigate. My mother jumped back in, her voice falsely bright, trying to smooth over my father's cruelty. "You can still be part of it. Of course you can. We wouldn't want you to miss it for the world. We've made special arrangements just for you." I waited. I knew the punchline was coming, the pathetic consolation prize designed to make them feel better about what they were doing. "We'll send you the link to the live stream," my dad said, his tone suggesting he was offering me a generous gift. "You can watch it all online from the comfort of your own home. It's just like being there? Better even. No crowds, no small talk. The comfort of my own home, so I could be ashamed in private. So I wouldn't tarnish their perfect picture with my unmanicured hands and my non-designer dress. The humiliation was so complete, so profound, that it went past tears. It was a cold, hollow ache that settled deep in my bones. I felt like a ghost, already erased from my own family's story. They expected me to argue. I could hear it in their tense silence. They expected me to cry, to scream, to plead. My mother had her soothing platitudes ready, and my father had his stern lectures on duty and appearances. But I gave them nothing. All the fight had been drained out of me over 29 years of being told, in 1,000 different ways, that I wasn't enough. Their final verdict didn't surprise me. It just confirmed everything I had always known. "Sure," I said, my voice a dead whisper. There was a surprised silence on their end. They had braced for a storm and gotten a dead calm. My quiet acceptance was probably more unsettling to them than any outburst would have been. "Oh," my mother said, flustered. "Well, good. That's very mature of you, Bella. We knew you'd understand. We knew we could count on you to do what's right for Lauren's big day. She didn't know me at all. I didn't understand. I was just too broken to fight back anymore, and I wasn't doing it for Lauren. I was doing it for me, because my own self-respect demanded that I not beg for a place at a table where I was so clearly unwanted. "Okay," I said. "I have to go. My paint is drying." I hung up the phone before they could say another word. I didn't throw it. I didn't scream. I just placed it gently on the table. I stared at my painting, at the dark, turbulent water crashing against the rocks, and at that one defiant ray of sunlight breaking through, and I felt nothing. It was the most terrifying feeling in the world. Not sadness, not anger, just a vast, empty void where a daughter's love for her parents was supposed to be. I stood there for hours, long after the sun had set and my studio was dark, surrounded by my art, the only thing in my life that had never told me I wasn't good enough. Saturday came, as it always does, indifferent to the dramas of the people living through it. The day was bright and painfully beautiful, the kind of perfect blue sky day that bridal magazines promise. I woke up with a hollow feeling in my stomach. For a split second I had forgotten. Then the memory of the phone call rushed back in, and the hollowness turned into a heavy weight in my chest. I had to get out of my apartment. I spent the morning at a flea market across town, trying to lose myself in a crowd of strangers. I sifted through bins of old records, ran my fingers over dusty antique furniture, and haggled with a vendor over a set of old silver frames. I needed to do something normal, something that had nothing to do with weddings or family, but the world seemed to be conspiring against me. A young couple held hands looking at engagement rings. A mother and daughter laughed together as they tried on vintage hats. Everywhere I looked, I saw a reflection of what I didn't have. Every time I saw a woman in a nice dress, my stomach twisted into a painful knot. By late afternoon, I gave up. I went home, the heavy silver frames clutched in my bag like a useless anchor. The pretense of a normal day was gone. I couldn't ignore it anymore. The wedding was happening, with or without me. I took a long, hot shower, letting the water run over me until my skin was red. I thought about what I would have worn. I had a dress. A simple, elegant dark green one that I had bought a year ago for a gallery opening. It was hanging in the back of my closet. I had imagined wearing it, imagined fixing my hair, maybe even seeing a flicker of approval in my mother's eyes. The thought was so absurd it almost made me laugh. Instead, I put on a clean pair of jeans and a soft, oversized cashmere sweater my grandmother had given me years ago. It was my comfort armor. It felt ridiculous, like I was dressing up for my own exclusion. But I needed to feel something other than the cold emptiness that had taken root inside me. I went into my small kitchen. I didn't have champagne, the celebratory drink of choice for the Carters and the Whitmores. My version of a celebration, or in this case an anti-celebration, was a cheap bottle of red wine, the kind that costs $8 and stains your teeth. I opened it and poured a generous glass. My hand was shaking slightly. I set up my laptop on the small wooden counter that separates my kitchen from my living area. My chair was a hard-backed wooden stool. This was my seat at the wedding of the year, my front row ticket to the merger. At exactly 7 p.m., I clicked the link my mother had texted me 2 days earlier. The message had been simple, no emotion, just the hyperlink. Livestream for Lauren's wedding. The screen flickered to life. And there it was, the ballroom. It was even more absurdly lavish than I had imagined. The camera panned slowly across a sea of crystal and white roses. Chandeliers the size of small cars dripped light from the ceiling, reflecting off 1,000 polished surfaces. A string quartet was playing something by Vivaldi, soft and elegant in the corner. Men in perfectly tailored tuxedos and women in shimmering jewel-toned gowns mingled, holding champagne flutes. It was a scene from a movie, a fantasy world that had no place for a girl with paint under her fingernails who was drinking cheap wine on a wooden stool. The stream was shockingly high quality, a multi-camera production with smooth transitions and professional sound. I felt a bitter laugh rise in my throat. They had probably spent more on the videographer than I made in 6 months. Anything to make sure the brand looked good, even for the online audience of distant relatives and, apparently, disinvited daughters. Then the camera found Lauren. She was standing near the entrance with Ethan, forming a receiving line. She looked breathtaking. Her dress was a masterpiece of silk and intricate lace. Her hair was swept up in an elegant knot, and her smile was dazzling, a high-wattage beam of perfection. She looked like a princess from a fairy tale I was never allowed to be in. For a fleeting second, a genuine pang of love and pride hit me. That was my sister, my beautiful sister. I remembered braiding her hair when we were little, the silky feel of it in my hands. But the feeling was quickly soured by reality. I watched her greet a state senator, her smile never faltering. She looked around the room, her eyes scanning the crowd with a look of perfect, practiced happiness. She wasn't looking for me. She hadn't called. She hadn't texted. She hadn't put up even a token protest to my disinvitation. I knew her. If she had wanted me there, she would have fought for it. But she hadn't. She had accepted it just like I had. She had chosen the merger over her sister. The ceremony began. I watched a stranger walk my sister down the aisle, because our father was already standing at the altar, beaming like the proud CEO he was. I watched her stand next to Ethan at an altar completely covered in white lilies. I listened to them exchange vows they probably didn't write, promising a forever that felt as staged and impersonal as the flower arrangements. "I vow to be your partner in life and in success," Ethan said, and I almost choked on my wine. I sipped my wine and told myself it didn't matter. I was fine. It was just a party I was missing. But my throat was tight, and I had to keep swallowing a lump of grief. It wasn't the party I was mourning. It was the idea that I ever had a real family to begin with. The camera panned to my parents in the front row. My mother was dabbing a single, perfect tear from her eye with a lace handkerchief, a beautiful portrait of maternal joy for the cameras. My father stood beside her, his chest puffed out with pride, a king surveying his kingdom. They were glowing. They were radiant. And as I watched them, a cold, hard truth settled in my heart. They weren't just happy at the wedding. They were happy without me at the wedding. My absence wasn't a sad necessity to them. It was a relief. I was the one variable they had successfully removed from their perfect equation. I was the messy, unpredictable piece of art that would have clashed with their beige world. I wondered if they even remembered I existed in that moment. Or was I just a link they had forwarded, a problem they had solved and filed away? Watching them from miles away through a cold screen, I had never felt more invisible. I was a ghost at their feast, and nobody even knew I was haunting the room. I took another long sip of wine, the bitter taste a perfect match for the feeling in my soul. The perfect wedding continued, and I kept watching, a silent, unseen witness to my own erasure. After the ceremony, the livestream transitioned seamlessly to the reception. The elegant strings of the quartet were replaced by a lively, sophisticated jazz band. The polite, church-like murmurs of the guests grew into a confident buzz of celebration and networking. The cameras, now more fluid and dynamic, swept across the ballroom, capturing smiling faces, clinking glasses, and the flawlessly executed first dance, where Lauren and Ethan moved together like they had practiced for weeks in a sterile dance studio. Everything was perfect, too perfect, like a house where all the furniture is covered in plastic. As an artist, I'm trained to see what's beneath the surface. I notice the subtle shift in color that betrays a coming storm, the crack in a smooth facade, the tension in a line that's supposed to be perfectly straight. And as I sat there on my hard stool, nursing my second glass of wine, I started to see the cracks in the perfect facade of the Whitmore-Carter wedding. The toasts came first. My father gave a booming, self-congratulatory speech about legacy, ambition, and success. He called Lauren and Ethan a power couple. Ethan's father made a dry joke about acquiring a beautiful new asset for the Whitmore portfolio. It was all so polished, so impersonal, so utterly devoid of genuine emotion. It was a business meeting with better food. Then it was time for the main course. The camera operator, probably trying to get some candid, humanizing shots for the wedding video, zoomed in on the head table. It was a long, extravagantly decorated table on a raised platform, so everyone in the room could look up at them. Lauren and Ethan sat in the center, flanked by my parents and Ethan's parents. They looked like a royal family on display. That's when I saw it. Under the warm, forgiving glow of the crystal chandeliers, something was deeply wrong. Lauren wasn't eating. The camera lingered on her for a moment, and I saw her pushing a piece of expertly prepared sea bass around her plate with her fork, shredding it into tiny pieces. Her smile, which had been so brilliantly fixed all evening, was gone. When she thought the camera wasn't on her, her face was tight, her jaw set in a way I recognized all too well. That was her silent, furious look. The one she got when she was trying with every ounce of her being not to cause a scene. Ethan was leaning toward her, speaking in a low, urgent voice. The live stream's directional microphones were focused on the ambient sound of the band and the chattering guests, so I couldn't hear the words clearly, but I could read the body language perfectly. He was being placating, dismissive. He had the look of a man trying to handle a situation he found annoying. He reached for her hand across the table, and she subtly, almost imperceptibly, pulled it away and placed it in her lap. The camera angle shifted slightly, giving me a clearer view of my mother. Eleanor Carter, the master of public relations, noticed the tension immediately. Her own smile was now stretched thin, a brittle mask. She leaned across the table, her movements sharp and discreet, and said something to Lauren. Her lips formed the words, "Smile. People are watching." Lauren shot her a look of pure venom, a look I had never seen her give our mother before. My heart started to beat a little faster. This was not part of the script. This was real. Who were they talking about? What could possibly be important enough to shatter the perfect illusion on Lauren's perfect day? The band took a short break, and in the relative quiet, the microphones on the head table picked up more than they were supposed to. The audio was still muffled, but I leaned closer to my laptop, straining to hear. "Can't believe you invited her." Lauren's voice was a sharp, controlled whisper, like the edge of a knife. "It's not a big deal, Laure." Ethan's voice was a low murmur. "She's just a friend. It would have been rude not to." "A friend? Is that what you call her?" The venom in her voice was unmistakable now. My mother jumped in. "Lauren, darling, please, not here. We can discuss this later." She was smiling like a hostage, her eyes darting around to see if anyone was paying attention. My father was now involved. He wasn't looking at Lauren. He was staring at Ethan, his expression cold and stern. His lips were a thin, hard line. This wasn't just a marital spat. This was a breach of contract. Ethan had done something to damage the brand. I felt like I was the only person in the world watching the real story. The 500 guests saw a beautiful bride at a lavish party. I saw my sister, miles away on a tiny screen, looking trapped and betrayed. I saw her perfect world, the one I had been deemed unfit for, starting to tremble on its foundations. I leaned closer to my laptop, my wine completely forgotten. My own hurt began to recede, replaced by a raw, intense curiosity. I was no longer a wounded outsider. I was a detective, the sole witness to a crime in progress. I scanned the crowd on the screen, searching for a face that didn't belong, for the source of the disruption. The camera panned across tables of laughing guests, all of them looking wealthy, connected, and content. Nothing seemed out of place, but the tension at the head table was escalating. It was a silent, brutal war being waged over a dinner of sea bass and asparagus. I could see Ethan trying to make a joke, and Lauren just staring at him with dead eyes. I saw my mother patting Lauren's arm, her movements quick and nervous like she was trying to calm a spooked horse before it bolted. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for them. They had worked so hard to stage this perfect production. They had controlled every detail, curated every guest, eliminated any potential for embarrassment, including me. And yet, here they were, right in the spotlight, and their perfect world was unraveling from the inside out, brought down not by the messy artist's daughter, but by something within their own pristine circle. The glitter was just a distraction. Underneath it, something was raw and real and ugly. And for the first time all night, I didn't feel like I was missing anything at all. I felt like I was the only one seeing the truth. The camera lingered on Lauren's face, her expression a mixture of fury and heartbreak, and I knew with absolute certainty that the show was about to end. The tension at the head table was a silent, crackling thing, a bubble of poison in the center of the glittering room. I was so focused on the tiny, angry movements between Lauren, Ethan, and my parents that I almost missed the shift in the room's atmosphere. It wasn't a sudden change, but a slow, creeping one, like the tide coming in. The ambient chatter of the guests began to dip in volume. The band, in the middle of a smooth jazz number, seemed to lose some of its rhythm, the notes becoming a little less certain. The main camera, which had been focused on the head table, suddenly pulled back, panning across the room as if searching for the source of the disturbance. Heads were turning, not all at once, but in a slow, rolling wave starting from the back of the ballroom. People were subtly nudging their dinner partners, whispering behind their hands. Their polite party faces were being replaced by masks of undisguised curiosity. And then the camera found her. The grand ballroom doors, which had been closed since the dinner service began, were open. And framed in the doorway, standing perfectly still, was a woman. She was tall and slender, wearing a simple sleeveless dress the color of blood. It was a bold, unapologetic choice in a sea of muted pastels and formal black. She wasn't looking around nervously. She wasn't trying to find a familiar face. She stood with a poise that was almost regal, her shoulders back, her chin up, surveying the room as if she owned it. Her hair was a cascade of dark curls, and even through the screen, I could see she was beautiful, but not in the polished, perfect way Lauren was. This woman's beauty was sharp, intelligent, and a little bit dangerous. She was completely, utterly calm, and that calmness was the most terrifying thing in the room. The camera operator was clearly intrigued. The shot tightened, zooming in on the woman in the red dress. The whispers in the ballroom grew louder, an audible hiss that the microphones were now picking up. The livestream's comment section, which had been a slow trickle of "congratulations" and "Lauren looks so beautiful," it suddenly exploded. "Who is that? OMG, the drama. That dress is not wedding guest attire, Lola." On my screen, the camera cut back to the head table, and the change was seismic. My mother's face had gone completely white, her fake smile frozen in a rictus of horror. My father looked like he had just witnessed a hostile takeover of his company. His face was dark with a fury so profound it seemed to vibrate. Ethan looked sick. He was staring at the woman, his mouth slightly agape, all the smooth banker confidence stripped away, leaving only a raw, primal panic. But it was Lauren's face that held me captive. The anger was gone, replaced by something far worse, a look of utter, soul-crushing dread. The kind of dread you feel when your worst nightmare walks into a room and starts heading straight for you. Her eyes were wide, fixed on the woman in the doorway. She was frozen, a statue of a bride carved from ice. The woman in red took a step into the room, and then another. She moved with a slow, deliberate grace, her eyes never leaving the head table. She wasn't rushing. She was savoring the moment, letting the tension build to an unbearable peak. The guests parted for her as she walked, creating a clear path from the door to the raised platform where my family sat. The band had stopped playing altogether. The only sound was the clicking of her heels on the marble floor and the collective, held breath of 500 people. She stopped a few feet from the head table, directly in front of Ethan. The main camera zoomed in so tight that her face and Ethan's were both in the frame. She smiled, a small, knowing smile that was not friendly. It was a smile of victory. "Congratulations, Ethan," she said. Her voice wasn't loud or shrill, but it was clear and steady, and in the dead silence of the ballroom, it carried like a gunshot. The livestream microphones picked it up perfectly. It was the sound of a match being struck in a room full of gasoline. Lauren didn't scream. She didn't move. She just sat there frozen. The guests were completely silent now, their faces a mixture of shock and morbid excitement. This was better than dinner. This was entertainment. I sat on my stool in my little kitchen miles away, my heart pounding in my chest. I felt a strange, dizzying mix of emotions. I was horrified for my sister, for the public nature of this humiliation, but underneath that there was a darker, more complicated feeling. It was a feeling of vindication. They had built their perfect, flawless world on a foundation of exclusion and judgment. They had deemed me unworthy of being in that room. And now the walls were coming down, not because of me, the designated failure, but because of a secret they had kept among themselves. The chaos they had so desperately tried to keep outside their gates had just walked in through the front door. The silence that followed the woman's words was absolute. It was a heavy, suffocating blanket that smothered the entire ballroom. For a few seconds, nobody moved. The woman in red, Ethan and Lauren, were frozen in a terrible tableau, captured perfectly by the high-definition camera. It felt less like a wedding and more like a hostage situation. Then Lauren blinked. The spell was broken. She turned her head, slowly, mechanically, away from the woman and toward my parents. Her eyes, which had been wide with shock, now narrowed into slits of pure, incandescent rage. Her voice, when she spoke, was no longer a whisper. It was low, guttural, and shaking with betrayal. "Did you know?" she asked, looking directly at my mother. "Did you know she would be here?" My mother's hand, which was resting on the white tablecloth, began to tremble violently. A water goblet next to her hand rattled against a plate. She couldn't seem to find her voice. She just shook her head, a pathetic, jerky movement. My father, however, leaned forward. "This is not the time or the place, Lauren," he hissed, his face a thundercloud. But Lauren ignored him. Her focus was entirely on our mother, the great planner, the one who controlled every detail. "Answer me," Lauren demanded, her voice rising. My mother flinched. She looked from Lauren to the woman in red, her perfect composure finally shattering into a million pieces. We didn't think she'd actually show up," she stammered, the words tumbling out in a panicked rush. "Ethan assured us it was handled." "Handled?" Lauren screeched, and the sound was so raw, so full of pain, that I physically recoiled from my laptop screen. This wasn't the calm, collected Dr. Lauren Carter I knew. This was a wounded animal. Ethan finally seemed to snap out of his trance. He reached for Lauren's hand, his voice a desperate, placating murmur. "Lauren, please. Let's not do this here. We can talk about this later." She yanked her hand back as if his touch had burned her. She stood up so abruptly that her chair scraped loudly against the floor. Now she was towering over him, her beautiful, expensive dress a costume for a role she was no longer willing to play. "You told me she was gone, Ethan," she yelled, and this time, her voice echoed through the silent hall. Every guest, every waiter, every member of the band was now staring, their faces a gallery of shock. "You swore to me that you had ended it. You swore it." The camera work became frantic. One camera stayed on Lauren's furious, tear-streaked face. Another panned to the guests, capturing their horrified, delighted expressions. A third zoomed in on the woman in red, who was watching the scene unfold with a look of detached, almost clinical satisfaction. She had lit the fuse and was now simply observing the explosion. And then, it happened. The implosion. It started with a jolt. The main camera, probably held by an operator who was being jostled in the chaos, shook violently. The pristine, stable image flickered. Voices started to rise all at once. My father's booming roar of "Security!" My mother's panicked cries of "Lauren, sit down!" Ethan's desperate pleading. The audio peaked, distorting into a garbled, digital shriek. The screen pixelated, the beautiful, clear image dissolving into a mess of colored squares. The scene would clear for a second, and I'd catch a glimpse of the horror. Lauren shoving Ethan's hand away. My father standing up and pointing a finger at the woman in red. And then it would dissolve back into chaos. It was like watching a memory fall apart. The camera jolted one last time, swinging wildly, and then it stopped. It froze. The live stream feed locked on a single, perfectly imperfect frame. It wasn't a wide shot of the ballroom. It wasn't a picture of the woman in red. The universe, in its infinite and cruel wisdom, had chosen to freeze on my sister. Her face filled the entire screen. Her mouth was open, frozen mid-yell. Her multi-$1,000 hair was coming undone, a strand falling across her forehead. The mascara, which had been so expertly applied, was running in black rivers down her cheeks, carving paths through her foundation. Her eyes, her calm, intelligent, always in control eyes, were wide with a pain and betrayal so raw, it felt like I was looking directly into her soul. It was the face of a woman whose entire world had been revealed as a lie in the most public way imaginable. The perfect bride, shattered. I stared at the frozen image on my laptop screen. My breath was caught in my throat. All the years of resentment, of feeling second best, of being the disappointment, it all melted away in that one terrible moment. All I could see was my sister who was hurting. And just like that, the screen went black. A single line of white text appeared. The live stream has ended. I sat there, on my hard kitchen stool, in the sudden deafening silence of my apartment. The only light was the glow of those 5 words on the black screen. I hadn't moved. I was frozen, just like the image of Lauren had been. I felt like I had just witnessed a car crash. A slow, deliberate, beautifully orchestrated car crash. The family's shiny, expensive vehicle had just been driven off a cliff, and I had watched it all happen on a cheap laptop with a glass of $8 wine in my hand. The perfect world they had fought so hard to protect, the world they had kicked me out of to preserve its perfection, had just publicly, spectacularly, and irrevocably burned to the ground. I don't know how long I sat there staring at the black screen. 10 minutes, an hour? Time seemed to have stopped. The silence in my apartment was absolute, a stark contrast to the chaos that had just unfolded. The remnants of my cheap wine sat in the glass, untouched. I finally pushed my stool back, the scraping sound loud in the quiet room, and walked to my window. The city lights twinkled below, a million little worlds, all of them completely unaware that the Carter family dynasty had just imploded. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept seeing Lauren's face, that final frozen frame of raw agony. Every time I closed my eyes, it was there. I felt a confusing storm of emotions, a deep, painful empathy for my sister, but also a strange, detached sense of finality. The performance was over. The lie was exposed. The next morning, the world caught up. My phone, which had been silent on its charger all night, buzzed at 7:03 a.m. It was a text from my cousin, Sarah.omgbella. Are you seeing this? Is Lauren okay? Before I could even reply, it buzzed again. This time it was an old neighbor from the town we grew up in. Just saw a video on Facebook. I am so sorry for your family, dear. Praying for you all, then another and another. My phone began to vibrate nonstop, a frantic buzzing insect on my nightstand. It was my Aunt Carol from Florida, second cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, even a few old high school friends. They weren't calling my parents or Lauren. They were contacting me, the safe outside observer, the one who wasn't in the room when the bomb went off. I opened my laptop, my hands trembling slightly. It didn't take long to find it. The perfect Whitmore wedding was trending on Twitter. Hashtags were already circulating. Wedding Crashers 2025, Whitmore Whitewash, Bye Bye Bella. a cruel joke I assumed was aimed at the other woman, but it stung nonetheless. The news articles were just starting to appear on gossip blogs and local news sites. High society wedding ends in chaos. Banker fiancé's pregnant ex-girlfriend crashes lavish nuptials. The full story was there, pieced together from dozens of cell phone videos that the guests had surreptitiously filmed. The professional live stream had ended, but the amateur one had just begun. The photographer, apparently fired on the spot by my furious father, had leaked his own clips to a major gossip website, and the details were so much worse than I could have imagined. The mystery woman's name was Chloe. She wasn't just Ethan's ex-girlfriend. She was his ex-fiancée. He had broken up with her only 6 months ago to be with Lauren, telling her he needed someone more suitable for his career trajectory. He had told Lauren that Chloe was unstable and had moved to another country. A clean, simple lie. The leaked clips showed what happened after my screen went black. Chloe, calm as ever, had walked right up to the head table and placed a small framed ultrasound picture right next to Lauren's plate of shredded fish. "I believe this belongs to you as well, Ethan," she had said, her voice loud enough for several nearby tables to hear. "You're going to be a father." The pregnancy was the detail that turned the story from a simple drama into a full-blown scandal. But there was more. It turned out Chloe hadn't just shown up. She had been invited. Ethan, in a move of staggering arrogance and stupidity, had invited her, thinking it would be a final power play, a way to show her what she had lost. He thought she would see his new, wealthy, perfect life and slink away, defeated. My parents, according to the gossip blog citing a source close to the family, had known about Chloe. They knew Ethan had a messy breakup, and they had helped him craft the story he told Lauren. They hadn't known she was pregnant, but they had known she existed. They had known she was a potential threat. They had gambled, betting that she wouldn't dare cause a scene. They had bet wrong. I clicked on a video, my morbid curiosity winning out over my better judgment. The quality was shaky, filmed from a guest table. It showed Lauren staring at the ultrasound picture, then looking at Ethan, her face a mask of disbelief. It showed my father yelling at the security guards. It showed my mother trying to pull Lauren away, trying to physically drag her out of the ballroom and away from the prying eyes. But Lauren wouldn't move. She just stood there, shaking, as her life fell down around her. I felt a wave of nausea. This was my family. This was my sister. And the whole world was watching, commenting, sharing, and laughing. The comment sections were a cesspool of cruelty and speculation. They mocked my mother's dress, my father's anger, Ethan's cowardice, and most of all, Lauren's perfect, shattered life. I closed the laptop. It was too much. The public humiliation was so vast, so complete. And I realized something with a startling clarity. My family had disinvited me from the wedding to avoid a potential, minor embarrassment. The embarrassment of having a daughter who was an artist, who didn't fit their mold. To protect their image, they had pushed me away. And in doing so, they had invited a catastrophe that didn't just tarnish their image, it obliterated it. The irony was so bitter it tasted like poison. They were so busy watching the wrong door, so worried about the threat they thought I posed, that they never saw the real bomb ticking right beside them. For the first time, I wasn't the family's biggest secret or its most embarrassing problem. I was just a footnote. The 2 days after the wedding were a strange, silent vacuum. My phone eventually quieted down after I sent a polite, generic text to everyone who had reached out. "Thank you for your concern. It's a difficult time for the family." I didn't hear a word from my parents or from Lauren. I imagined their big, beige house had become a war room, the silence thick with blame and recriminations. I pictured my father on the phone with lawyers, my mother with public relations crisis managers. I pictured Lauren locked in her old bedroom, the one with framed photos of all her achievements on the wall, staring at the ruins of her life. I spent those 2 days in my studio. I painted. I threw myself into my work with a desperate intensity. I mixed dark, stormy colors. Indigo, charcoal gray, deep violet. I worked on a huge canvas, letting the emotion pour out of me onto the fabric. I wasn't painting the ocean or the sky. I was painting chaos. I was painting the feeling of a world breaking apart. It was the only thing that made sense. On the third day, a Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang. The screen displayed a single word. Mom. My heart didn't jump. My stomach didn't knot. I felt a strange, cold calm settle over me. I put my paintbrush down, wiped my hands on my already paint-stained jeans, and answered. "Hello," I said. My voice was even. There was a shaky breath on the other end of the line, then a sound I hadn't heard in years, the sound of my mother crying. Not the single, perfect, ladylike tear she had shed at the ceremony, but a racking, ugly sob. "Bella." She managed to get out. her voice thick and broken. "Oh, Bella," I waited. I didn't offer comfort. I didn't say, "What's wrong?" I knew what was wrong. The whole world knew what was wrong. She took another shuddering breath. "Bella, we made a mistake." The words hung in the air between us. A mistake. Such a small, simple word for such a monumental disaster. I thought about all the years of small cuts, of being overlooked, of being told I wasn't enough. I thought about the phone call where they had so calmly and clinically amputated me from the family for the sake of appearances. And now, after their perfect world had been set on fire, they were calling me. A cold, quiet anger, an anger I hadn't even realized I was holding on to, rose up in me. It wasn't hot or explosive. It was sharp and clear like a shard of ice. "A mistake?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "Which part are you referring to, Mom?" There were so many. Was the mistake trusting Ethan? Was it letting a pregnant woman into the wedding? Or was the mistake disinviting me from the public implosion that has now been viewed 2 million times on YouTube? The line went silent, except for the sound of her choked sobs. I had never spoken to my mother like that in my entire life. I had always been the quiet one, the one who accepted things. The person on the phone wasn't that girl anymore. That girl had died somewhere between the live stream link and the screen going black. "You don't understand what we're going through," she finally whispered, her voice full of self-pity. "No," I said, and the word was hard, like a stone. "You're right. I don't. Because I wasn't there. Remember?" There was a rustling sound, and then my father's voice came on the line. It was a voice I had never heard from him before. All the boom and bluster were gone. It was thin, tired, and hollowed out. Defeated. "Bella," he said. "Dad." He sighed, a long, weary sound. "Your mother. We're not doing well. Lauren won't come out of her room. The Whitmores are threatening to sue us for the cost of the wedding, as if this wasn't their son's fault." He paused. "The law firm is considering dropping me from the partnership because of the scandal." He listed his tragedies like a CEO reading a bad earnings report. But then his voice changed. It dropped lower, and for the first time, I heard something that sounded like genuine shame. "We're ashamed, Bella," he said quietly. "We were so obsessed with how everything looked. With their name, their money. We didn't look at the person. You tried to talk to Ethan that night at dinner. About his life, about something real. And I cut you off. You saw something and we didn't want to see it." He took a shaky breath. "You were right about them. About all of it. This was it. The moment I had unconsciously been waiting for my entire life. The admission. The validation. The acknowledgement that I wasn't the problem. The 10-year-old me, the one with the drawing on the fridge, wanted to cry with relief. The 29-year-old me felt a profound, quiet sadness. It had taken all of this public crucifixion, for them to finally see me. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to say, "I told you so." I didn't need to list all my grievances. The war was over. I had won, but it didn't feel like a victory. It just felt finished. "I know," I said, just those 2 words. They held everything. "I know I was right. I know you were wrong. I know you're ashamed. I know you're sorry. I know." Then, before he could respond, before he could try to fill the space with more excuses or apologies, I did something I had never done before. I hung up. I ended the call. I took back the power. I stood in the middle of my studio, surrounded by my chaotic, colorful, beautiful mess, and I felt a sense of peace descend on me. It wasn't joy. It wasn't triumph. It was the quiet, profound peace of being free. Weeks passed. The scandal slowly faded from the headlines, replaced by new dramas as they always are. Lauren moved back home, humiliated but humbled. The merger was officially dissolved. Ethan, I heard through the family grapevine, had moved to another state to prepare for fatherhood, and a mountain of legal battles. One rainy Sunday afternoon, my phone rang. It was Lauren. My heart skipped a beat. We hadn't spoken since before the disinvitation. "Hey," she said. Her voice was small, fragile. "Hey, Laure," I said gently. We were silent for a moment, the sound of the rain against my window filling the space. "Bella, I'm so sorry," she finally whispered, and her voice cracked. "I should have defended you. I should have told them that if you weren't coming, I wasn't coming either. I was just so caught up in it all, in being the perfect one." "You were scared too," I said, and the words came out without any anger, only a deep, sad understanding. "So was I, for a long time. But look at us now." A small, wet laugh came through the phone. "Yeah," she said. "Look at us now." We laughed together through the tears. A real laugh, the kind we hadn't shared since we were kids, before the corporation took over our family. A week later, she came to my apartment. She looked different, thinner. The perfect polished shell was gone. She was just a woman whose heart had been broken. She looked at all my paintings on the walls, her eyes wide. "This is your life," she said, almost in awe. "It's real. Now every Sunday we get together. Sometimes at my place, sometimes at hers. She got a small apartment on the other side of town, far from the beige house. We don't talk about the wedding much. Instead, we watch old movies, curled up on the couch with a bowl of popcorn between us. We watch them not from a live stream, but side by side. Sometimes she still apologizes. "I'm sorry I was such a coward," she'll say during a commercial. I just shake my head and tell her, "Don't be." Life froze on that screen for a reason, because sometimes the universe has to hit pause on the ridiculous, painful show you're starring in. It has to freeze frame the chaos so you can finally see the truth, not to punish you, but to set you free.